A few years ago, I posted a teach yourself piano course here on YouTube, and at the time it was kind of a bit of fun. I thought I might learn something from doing it, and I thought maybe a few hundred people might have a look at it and maybe get something out of it. What I didn't expect was to be sat here kind of 5 or 6 years later in September 2023, and at this point, something like 1.5 million people have had some kind of contact with that course. I think about 10 to 15,000 people have completed it in its entirety. By the way, it's still here, it's still on YouTube, it's still completely free. You can find a link to the playlist in the description text down below. Now, one way in which it has fulfilled my expectations is that it has been a learning experience for me, because I have learned a huge amount about the way self-teaching piano players tend to go about learning this weird instrument of ours. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you through the 10 most common problems that self-teaching piano players face. What I'll do is describe each problem quite briefly and then talk you through the solution. Problem number 1 is a tendency to race. Now, this is something that I see coming up in my emails or my comments about 5 or 6 times a week. Someone will drop me a message saying, "Hey Bill, I'm really enjoying your beginner's piano course, and I got through lessons 1 to 7, in like 5 days. It was great. I really enjoyed it. But now I've got to lesson 8 and suddenly it's really hard. Why did you have to make lesson 8 so difficult?" The thing is, lesson 8 isn't much more difficult than lesson 7. What's happened to that guy is that he has raced through the early lessons because they seem easy. And then what's happened is that he's got to lesson 8 where things just get a little bit more challenging, and suddenly the foundation that he's built isn't strong enough. Now, the solution to this problem is to work hard, especially in the early days, on the basic stuff, learning the note names, learning where notes are on the piano, on the music staff, yeah? Really basic stuff like that, get it completely internalized. And that means when you get to things that are a little bit more challenging, you're not having to spend any mental energy at all working out the basics. This can be a problem for adults because we have a tendency to think that if we understand something mentally, we can also do it physically. But that's not the case. It takes longer to really internalize something. So don't race. Work hard on the stuff that seems easy, and that will put you in a good position to make progress when things start to get difficult. The second major problem is lack of direction, and this is a really common one, and it stems from the fact that there is so much stuff here on YouTube for piano learners. Yeah, a lot of people start out trying to teach themselves piano with a kind of vague goal, like, I want to be a jazz piano player, or I want to be a classical piano player, and they kind of nibble around the different tutorials. They search, they find some they like and some they don't like, and they watch a bit of one and a bit of another, and they kind of end up going in circles and not making very much progress, okay? That's because they don't have a pathway. They know they have a goal, but they're unsure of the way of getting there. If that is you, then try following a course. Even if you're kind of, really resistant to the idea of following a course, at least it will give you a direction of travel. There's my piano course, like I said, here on YouTube, completely free, link down below. There are other people's piano courses. Find the one that suits you, okay? Everybody is different. If you want, you could follow a book course like Alfred or the Complete Piano Player. If you absolutely have to, you could even use one of the piano learning apps. Now, I hate the apps because they encourage a button pushing mentality, which is terrible. I'll talk more about that later. But at least, if it's all you've got, at least it will give you a direction of travel. And that is absolute gold. Problem number 3 is the tick of doom. Now, this is something that affects all amateur musicians, but I think it's a particular issue for self-teachers. What happens is you're practicing something like a piece, or more likely a few individual bars or a single lick of an improvisation, and suddenly you can do it. You put in a lot of hard work and then you can do it, and great. You say, tick, done. The thing is, though, it's not done, and probably the next time you sit down to play it, you'll find that it doesn't quite work or it falls apart. That's because you need always to push past the point at which you think you have mastered something. If something feels like it's got together, absolutely great, but practice it 20 or 30 more times, yeah? Because that's when you really get things nailed down. I talked about this technique of pushing past in a recent tutorial. I'll stick a link to that down in the description text down below, and it's worth following up in more detail because it's a big issue for a lot of self-teachers. Always push past the point at which you think you can play something and resist the tick of doom. Problem 4, scales and exercises. I'm awfully sorry, but you're probably not doing enough of them. As a self-teacher, it's natural to say, I want to play interesting stuff. I don't want to do all this boring stuff like scales. Yeah, so you tend to skip the scales and exercises and you go on to play the pieces. But that can really hold you up, yeah? It's one of those invisible things that can hold you up. Exercises, scales in general, are really, really good for you. They improve your finger strength and control, they improve your flexibility, they improve your knowledge of different keys. So if you want to get into playing scales and exercises, what do? Well, a good place to start might be my beginner's course because that's got loads of scales and exercises built into it. Once again, link in the description text. If you're more of a deep end kind of person, then you might check out the ABRSM Manual of Scales, Broken Chords and Arpeggios, which is rammed with this kind of stuff. You might also be interested in my new project, which is called Exercises, Inventions and Ideas. Yeah, it's a whole collection of different things to help you boost up your piano skills with different drills and bits and pieces to have a go on the piano keyboard, warm-ups, things like that. And I've deliberately created all of them so that they're actually fun to play. Now, the very first instalment of Exercises, Inventions and Ideas is live on YouTube. It takes the form of a YouTube video with an accompanying downloadable PDF. Yeah, you can find that using the link in the description text below. The thumbnail looks like this. Now, the subsequent instalments of Exercises, Inventions and Ideas, they're kind of ongoing. I've just published a third one, are only available to my Patreon subscribers. So this is yet another great reason to support me on Patreon, which doesn't cost very much, but which offers you loads of great benefits. Also, if you sign up to support me on Patreon, you get complimentary access to my piano packs, which is really worth having. So head over to patreon.com/Bill Hilton to find out more about that. Problem number 5, not getting feedback. Now, this is a major problem for self-teachers because feedback is essential for all musicians. It stops you going down blind alleys, it corrects mistakes before they snowball, it helps you to see opportunities that you might be missing. But as a self-teacher, you're by yourself. So how do you get feedback? I think as a self-teacher, you have 2 strategies for getting feedback, and you should use both of them. One of them is to get feedback from external expert musicians. Various ways of doing it. You could approach a local piano teacher and just get a one-off lesson every now and then if you don't mind spending some money. You can video yourself and post it on YouTube or Reddit, one of the piano forums, ask for feedback. The other thing you can do is generate feedback for yourself, and this is something I do and it's surprisingly effective. All you need to do is video yourself playing, and video is better than just recording. So just set up your phone. There are loads of different ways of doing it. Get it on a music stand, hang it above your piano like I do. Just balance it on the side of the piano. Anything that you can do to capture imagery and sound of yourself playing. Then practice something, play something, take the video and forget about it for a week or 2 weeks or a month, yeah? Then come back to it and you'll be looking at it with fresh eyes. And that is really valuable because you will notice things that you did not notice at the time when you were doing that practice or playing that piece, okay? It can also be surprisingly good for your morale because you look at something you've played in the past and you think, actually, that's pretty good. So generate that feedback for yourself, get that feedback from other people. Try to do it regularly and systematically, and you will find that makes a big, big difference to your progress. Problem number 6 is inefficient practice. You need an attack the problem mentality. So what's one of those? Well, an attack the problem mentality means that when you are practicing, you tend to focus in on stuff that you find difficult and you don't spend too much time playing through stuff that you can already do quite comfortably. So let's say that you're working on a piece of music and you can play most of it pretty well. There's just one little bit about halfway through that you keep tripping up on. Now, the classic mistake that beginners and amateurs make is that they play through the piece, they get to the mistake, they say, whoops, I made a mistake, and they go back to the beginning of the piece and they play through again, then they hit the mistake again, and then they go back to the beginning. And that's really tempting, but it's a big waste of time because you're spending most of that practice session playing through stuff you can already play. Much better to focus on and isolate that problem, to attack it, and then when you can play it, to slot it back in. So literally just take out the bar or two that is causing you a problem, work really hard on it, and then put it back in the piece. That's a much more efficient use of your practice time, and if you practice efficiently, you're going to make faster progress. Number 7, the problem of unknown unknowns. I'm channeling Donald Rumsfeld here. Now, when you're learning a complex skill like the piano, there are some aspects of it that you know you don't know. You know that you can't play the scale of F sharp minor in 2 hands. You know that you can't improvise over a particular chord progression or whatever. But you need to watch out for the things that you don't realise you don't know. Let me give you one of the kind of all-time classic examples of what I'm talking about. I'm going to be using here some sheet music that's probably quite a lot more advanced than you will be looking at if you are a beginning self-teacher, but it will do to illustrate the point I want to make. Here we have the score for Chopin's C-sharp minor waltz, really famous piece of music, and as you can see, he's written in lots of pedal markings. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is Chopin and not his editor, by the way. These are original. He's been very clear that you need to use the sustain pedal in this piece of music. Moving on, here is Brahms's Intermezzo in A major, one of my favourite pieces of piano music of all time, and as you can see there are no pedal markings whatsoever, but you still need to use the sustain pedal in this piece. Brahms just kind of takes it as read that you're going to use the pedal because that's kind of what kind of music it is, yeah? And that is something that is not obvious to you if you're self-teaching, okay? An unknown unknown. A piano teacher would tell you, yeah, but if you were just looking at these pieces of music as an absolute beginner, you might assume that you use the pedal in this one, but not in this one, and that's not the case. Problem number 8 is overestimating your weaknesses and underestimating your strengths. This is a problem for adult learners pretty much in every domain. It's really easy to get into a spiral of negativity and self-doubt and say to yourself things like, oh, I can't learn as quickly as I used to, or I don't have time for this, or people will laugh at me, all of that kind of thing. And all of those things may be true, actually, but they're probably less true than you think they are. And at the same time, you're probably underestimating some of your key strengths. And a real strength you have as an adult is maturity. You've spent many years learning how to learn and learning about how you learn. And you've probably learned in particular that if you stick at something and really kind of, make a sustained effort, you tend to do at least okay. In other words, you've developed what scientists call grit. Angela Duckworth's written this brilliant book about it, which if you tend to be a doubting sort of person, a self-doubting sort of person, you should definitely have a look at. Because grit is the key advantage that gives adults, or can give adult learners of the piano, the push through they need to make serious progress. So yes, be aware of your weaknesses, but don't overestimate them, and always be aware of the strengths that you bring to the table. Problem number 9, not doing enough reinforcement. Now this is a big issue for adult learners and older adult learners in particular, but it affects everybody. I actually made a whole tutorial about it here on YouTube recently, and I'll add a link to that in the description text down below. Now, one of the reasons that as adults we don't make as much progress as kids is that we don't have the same kind of brain plasticity that they have, okay? They physiologically learn things quicker. And sometimes people get depressed about that. They say, I'm not a kid anymore, I can't learn stuff, blah, 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 blah. The fact is, we can very easily compensate for that relative lack of brain plasticity by just doing more work on reinforcing our knowledge. Like I said earlier, a big problem that adults have is that they tend to say, yeah, I've got that, I can do it, job done. In fact, what you need to do is go back and work on stuff that you have done earlier to reinforce it, to strengthen it, to keep shoring up your foundations. I often say to people who are going through the beginner's course, say they're on lesson 10 and things are a little bit tricky, I say, right, go back to lesson 6 and redo 6, 7, 8 and 9. Yeah, maybe not in the same detail that you did the first time, but just to reinforce your learning, and that will give you a little bit of a boost to, kind of keep you going through the course. And it works every single time. So do not underestimate the importance of reinforcement. Practice stuff that seems obvious. Practice things that you think you can play, pieces that you think you can master. Basic stuff like practicing scales and exercises every day can make a really big difference there. Just don't kind of be out there at the cutting edge all the time. Be shoring up your foundations. How's that for a mixed metaphor? Problem 10 is the biggest one of all. It's imagining that learning how to play the piano is just about pressing buttons, figuring out which keys to play in which order. You see this algorithmic mentality a lot on YouTube. People are like, yeah, just tell me which notes to play. But there's so much more to playing the piano than pressing buttons. There's articulation, dynamics, expression, all of the stuff that goes into making meaningful, listenable, logical, musical music. Now, the way to beat the button pushing mentality is to listen. When you practice, it's fatally easy to focus so hard on the physical movements that you're making that you start to ignore the sounds coming out of the piano. When you listen carefully, you'll start to hear how much those other things, the legato, the dynamics, the phrasing, the expression, how much they make a difference. And that should nudge you into giving them the attention they deserve. So did any of that stuff kind of ring bells with you? If it did, let me know down in the comments, because for me, this learning process about how you guys learn is ongoing, yeah? It's always good to find out more. Anyway, that's it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. Check out my social media, and don't forget to check out my different products and my Patreon over at patreon.com/Bill Hilton. Remember, if you sign up to support me on Patreon, which doesn't cost very much, then you get access to my exercises, inventions and ideas installments as they're posted. And you also get complimentary access to my piano packs, which you can buy separately, by the way. There are links to them down below, along with links to my various books. But if you sign up and support me on Patreon, you get them at no extra charge. Okay, happy piano playing. Well done, self-teachers. You're doing great work. You need a big pat on the back. Keep it up. I'll see you soon.